Hey guys, welcome to the next episode of the Refuse to Lose podcast. For the very first time, we are stepping outside of rugby league, and I couldn't think of a better guy to do this with than Kieran Jack. Kieren is a former captain of the Sydney Swans who played 256 games in the AFL, but he is so much more than just an athlete. In this episode, Kieren touches on his early life growing up as the son of a Balmain Tigers legend. He then talks about his transition from playing rugby league into the AFL and how he turned himself from a draft reject into a premiership winning superstar who went on to play in 3 AFL grand finals. He also lifts the lid on the entire Adam Goodes booing saga for the very first time, giving an insight into what it was like to be a teammate of Adam's during the AFL's darkest days. He talks about the anger, the confusion, and the great sorrow it caused him, and how he still looks back on it now and what he could have done differently at the time. In this episode, Kieren also talks about retirement and how it's allowed him to throw himself into community work and helped him become an advocate for a number of important issues. I've done a lot of sports interviews for my job, and I can honestly say that this is one of the most refreshing, intellectual, and eye-opening conversations I've ever had. There's also some great locker room stories in there as well, ranging all the way from the Dalai Lama to toothbrushes in the dressing room. So please enjoy my chat with Kieran Jack. Kieran Jack, welcome to the Refuse to Lose podcast, mate.
Thank you, Jake. Mate, of the man with the best name in rugby league, in rugby league journos. Well, by Brad Fittler anyway. No, I do see your stuff on the Footy Show, and it's a pleasure to be on here, mate. Pleasure.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me at your house. I've been talking to your wife, Charlotte, and she said, make sure that he cleaned up the dining room. So it looks pretty clean. It looks like you've done a good job.
It's clean, mate. Yeah, you know, she got called down to do a story in Wagga actually tonight, so I've had the full day to get it clean. So yeah, make sure you let her know that it's all done.
It's funny. It's funny you mentioned my name. People say it to me all the time. Like they say, "Oh, your name is the best name for TV."
But who started that? It was Freddie, wasn't it?
Yeah. Freddie started. Yeah, but I've heard it for years.
Oh, yeah.
And I never thought about my name like that. No, you know.
And you're absolutely finishing this podcast with a classic Jake Duke sign off. Okay, I want that at the end.
Oh, they've been making me do that for years, mate. Sound like a flog, but anyway,
that's great.
Yeah, we can hear Nelson out there barking. If anyone doesn't know, there's a couple of stars in this house. There's you, obviously.
I'm third in line.
Yeah, there's Charlotte, the Channel 10 presenter, and then there is Nelson the Bulldog, who is an Instagram star.
Yeah, he's been a bit quiet lately, but he was an Instagram star. He's pretty loud. If you can hear him in the background, I apologise. I've tried to put him out with a bit of a chew toy, but he's destroyed that already. So he wants to say good day to you, I think.
Who? Because he gets dressed in the little outfits and stuff. Like, is that you dressing him or?
Oh, no. What do you think? No, don't do that. There's plenty in there though. He's got shark outfits and strawberry outfits and hot dogs. It gets out of control.
Does she love him more than she loves you?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. It's been asked a few times. Yeah, wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me
because he was at the wedding and everything, wasn't he? Like
he's front and center at the wedding. He had a tux on at our wedding, yeah. So he's an important part of the family.
Why Bulldogs? You know, they're an interesting dog. Like some people love them, some people are like, oh no, I couldn't do with a Bulldog. Do you guys a particular affinity with Bulldogs?
I got him after the 2012 grand final, so he's a premiership Bulldog.
Yeah, okay.
Ironic that we lost to the Bulldogs a few years later, actually, in a premiership.
You just couldn't look at him after that, could you?
He was conflicted that week. It was a tough week for him. No, I came across them a couple of times, and I just love their demeanour. They're a humble dog. They're right by your side. There's plenty of character to them. They're a little bit hard to handle at times. They're pretty bossy and demanding, but they're just great. They're great dogs around people. So, and he's at the door just barking now because he wants to come in. He probably runs the house, to be honest.
Yeah. He wants to say hello. I'll go give him a pat afterwards.
Yeah, please.
So, mate, you're a bit of uncharted territory. First time we've done a podcast outside of rugby league. So, you know, but as I said, I feel like we're cheating a little bit because we're making a slow transition. You've grew up playing rugby league. You obviously have rugby league pedigree. I just like to, you know, get the Kieran Jack rugby league career in your early life. What was that like?
Well, thank you for having me on the show as the first cross code. But you're right. Yeah, I've got a interesting probably story into AFL. Kid growing up in Sydney, should have played rugby league, should have gone down a similar path. Grew up around rugby league clubs. Grew up around Balmain change rooms with Pierces and Roaches and Sirenans, and those kids all went on to play. Well, not all of them did, but a few of them went on to play rugby league and at the highest level. So I loved rugby league as a kid. I really did. It wasn't until I was 12 or 13 that I came across this code of AFL footy, and it was probably on the back of what the Swans did in '96. They made the grand final for the first time in Sydney, and sort of a wave of support came behind Sydney, and we started to just watch it on TV a little bit more as kids. Had some friends that were starting to play AFL football, and I think the investment in the code from a grassroots level went to another level, and it was at a school competition that they introduced called the Paul Kelly Cup. So Paul Kelly was a former captain of the Swans. He sort of was the name to this new kind of Oz kick, just a really easy, fun game to play, boys and girls, targeted at 11, 12-year-old kids. And as a kid, I just played any sport that I could. I loved the competition side of it. So gave it a go and just loved it. Loved the big open space. I loved kicking in league. It sort of suited me, the skills that were there. I was a smaller kid, so I used to get belted around a bit playing league in the junior levels, and we all know what they're kind of like. The unevenness of sizes that you can get at times. So I was exposed to that. Didn't really receive that in AFL. But just loved the game, loved the whole concept of it. And the following year signed up to my local club and kind of progressed throughout playing the two codes. So my weeks were pretty busy during the week. Weekends of AFL Saturday, Rugby League Sunday. And then at 15 I had a choice to make, what I wanted to put my time in and what I was more passionate about. And at that point, AFL was, I was making more representative teams and going further and just enjoying it more. So that's the decision I made. Fast forward a couple more years, you come into the draft and the AFL draft system and what that's all about. And actually, I missed the draft to begin with. So in the AFL, it's different to rugby league. There's the end of the year, all the clubs come together and they'll pick probably 80 to 90 of the top 100 kids. And it's meant as a mean of equalisation. So if you come last, you get the first pick of the draft. So they try and equalise the competition that way. I missed that first batch, so I wasn't good enough there. And a couple of weeks later, they run what's called a rookie draft, which is basically what's left of that group. They're on one-year deals. They're not guaranteed. And a lot of the clubs will give it as a bit of an experiment. We've seen Paul Roos go out and try athletes from America and ex-basketballs. That's pretty much primarily where the rookie list sort of came from. Around 2005, when I got picked up, was around the time where the Swans won the premiership and they were looking to invest more money in New South Wales, and there were actually incentives around the Swans to pick more kids from New South Wales to try and grow the game. So they had 3 allocated rookie spots specifically for New South Wales players. And I got taken as one of those. So I was the last pick of the rookie draft, which was pick 58, and got into the club that way. So if you're talking about pure talent coming into the ranks, like I was at the bottom end of the scale. Like I was had a lot of deficiencies in kicking, which I didn't get because I wasn't a kid that grew up in Victoria. It was a different pathway in Sydney. We were still very much learning about the game, but comparatively to other players, it was very different. So I had a lot of work to do, and that's pretty much where the journey started.
I want to get to how you picked up the intricacies of AFL and that in a second. I wanted to go back quickly when you mentioned growing up and being around those Balmain change rooms, around those guys, some of those legends. What was that like? Do you have much memory of being in those places?
When I think back, I've got a few memories after games, running on Leichhardt Oval, picking up cans and trying to kick cans around and over the crossbar it would have been with Mitchell Pearce and Curtis Sirenan and those types. So, and that's my early memory. We did go over as a family to England in the early 90s too. My dad played for Salford and Sheffield over there. younger brother Brown was born over there, so I've got some memories there as well. But yeah, you look back at that Balmain Leichhardt period, everyone talks about it. It was a pretty special team that they had at that point. They missed out on grand finals, but it was a club that are kind of probably similar in a way to the Swans throughout the early 2010s period. It was a younger group that came through together and had a successful period without the premierships that were there.
So when you're trying to learn AFL then, right, you've grown up playing league, and it's, as you said, it's not everything's second nature. When you're trying to learn a new sport, when you do it from a very young age, you get it. It's that muscle memory kind of thing. So how did you then learn the intricacies of AFL? Like someone told me something like at Swans training, they just had you tag someone or follow someone around. Like how did it all work for you?
Yeah, it wasn't second nature to me. That was the people talk about mastering skills, and it's that 10,000 hour philosophy. You've got to put time and time and time into it. When I got to the Swans, I was a long way behind the hours that other players had put in. So the only way I was going to get places was through hard work. Had to literally strip back my kicking technique. I had an around the corner rugby league kicking style. So they used to have me kicking in a straight line, just 10 or 15 metres, and we'd go back a couple of steps and just straight line, get my leg going straight. Yeah, that was for an hour or so after training every day. Learning the lay of the land in terms of where to run in AFL football. It's a different game because it's 360. It's not so much rugby league's, it's in front of you all the time. It was very difficult to understand what was going on behind me and in front of me and to the side. So tagging was the way that they introduced that to me. And tagging, put simply, is pretty much having a player literally follow the opposition's best player around and try to stop them. So there's a couple of skills that I had. I could tackle, and I was determined, had this dogged attitude to, play my role, whatever it was. And that was probably what suited me, because to stop someone and negate them, that was second nature. I could tackle, I could do all that sort of stuff. But I had to follow someone around to actually know where to go to do it, if that makes sense. So that's where that all began. And then as the years progressed after that, the knowledge picked up, the intricacies, it became second nature. And then I was actually learning to back myself and go over here and be offensive in my own right.
When you mentioned how far kind of down the pecking order you were when you started, like, and we hear great stories of guys all the time in the NFL, especially the basketball guys, right down the line, and they go on to have these amazing careers. But where's your mindset at when you're early on and you left so late, you picked up so late? How do you then go on to think, how am I gonna be successful at this? I'm so far down the line. Yeah,
I was just rapt to get an opportunity. Like I was like, I felt like all I needed was an in. I just wanted to get into an AFL club and absorb, learn, and hard work. And I was so glad that it was the Swans, because they were coming off a premiership. Great club, great culture, great people to learn off. I learn off some of the best, like Brett Kirk, who was another rookie list player, became a champion of the game. Jude Bolton, Leo Barry, Jared. There's so many mentors. Adam Goods. So many mentors to learn from. That I just followed what they did. If I had have gone to a poor club, I reckon it would have been really difficult to pick up on what it would have taken to get to that level, because I wouldn't have known. I was so far back that it would have taken me too long. So to actually get in there and just see those icons and just go, yep, I'm following you guys, that's what set me up. And it's funny how the Swan system has kind of evolved. That's what it is. You come in, you learn off what we hope are the leaders and the pinnacle and the best players. You get to that point, and then you pass the baton on yourself to the next group coming through. It's a great rolling culture that we have in place, but it takes time, and nothing's for granted there. So you need to keep working at it.
Did you think if you were to go back now just thinking back at the time, did you think you had the potential to have the career you had? Like, did it exceed all of your expectations?
No. I would have been rapt to have played some senior football. Wouldn't have thought that I'd you look back on it now and, win a premiership and, be captain of the football. I would never have thought that was possible, but that's the result of you get in, you work hard, you're in a great system, you lead that system, things just start sort of happening. But at that point at 18 or 19, it was no guarantee I was going to get a second year, really, let alone play for 14 or 15 years. So it was, and I don't reckon you would have found a coach or recruiter that would have thought this, a dissimilar thing, really. I reckon maybe I lived with an assistant coach at the time who I'm still really close with. I reckon he's actually told me, he goes, I thought you would have played maybe 30 or 40 games. And that was good thinking, that was pretty optimistic.
Did that drive you? Like they say about little guys or guys that aren't as big a stature or they don't have the names, do you get the chip on your shoulder?
I did well, at that point I didn't. I mean, if he had told me I thought you played 30 or 40, I would have been wrapped. What drove me was, I mean, when I was a junior, when I was 15 or 16, you miss out on some sides and, coaches would tell me, mate, you're too small. You're not going to play AFL football. Like, blokes getting drafted now, 6'2", 6'3", there's a similar style and build you have to be. Mate, you're not going to make it. Maybe play VFL or SANFL, but you're not going to play AFL. So hearing that as a kid guts you, and that was probably a bit of a chip on the shoulder. I used to run all the time, and in my head I'd be thinking, too small, not too small, I'm going to make it. That was a driving force for sure. And when you don't make the draft, I'll try and prove you guys wrong too.
And it's amazing how common that is, right? And like you see athletes all over the world. That's similar stories. It pushes and pushes and pushes, and it's like that. I'll prove you wrong mentality. It was a message that we at the club we always would tell the young kids as well when they first came through the door, because primarily every year you get between 5 and 8 new kids that are 18, 19. Some go pick top 10 in the draft. Some will be the last round of the rookie draft. We literally put them in a room and talk to them about the club, and we say, righto, everything's off the table. We don't care what draft pick you are. You're all at this level now. You want to buy in? Buy in. If you don't, get out the door. Okay? It's pretty simple. The ones that work hard are the ones that get there. Simple philosophy, but it just runs true. Yeah, it does. So you obviously then you go on, you start your career, and then it reaches a pinnacle in 2012. You've played some good solid years leading up to that, but in the AFL there's nothing like playing on grand final day. Do you remember what the 2012 grand final was like in the lead up and then being out there?
Yeah, it was a very special feeling, but that whole year was a special year, I thought, because we'd been a group that, as I said, we were a youngish group. We had great leaders like Goodsey and Jude and Lewis Roberts Thompson at the time, but there was a core group there, and I'm talking about guys who were Heath Grundy, Jared McVeigh, Nick Smith, myself, Dan Hanbury, who were all around probably between the ages of 23, 26. So we're all kind of in that prime footy year. We came in the top 4 for the first time that year. We played Adelaide in the first final over there. Adelaide, I think, were on top of the ladder and beat them. So we had a week off into a prelim. So the confidence just built amongst this group, and we were having sort of chats on a weekly basis and talks about, well, what if? Like, let's not put a ceiling on ourselves here. Let's go for this. We played Collingwood in a prelim, who we hadn't beaten for years prior to that. They had some astronomical record on us. And we beat them in the prelim. So that we just rode this wave of finals are like, how often do you see a team that rides emotion into finals and they just continue to ride it, and you can't ever predict a final series because there's so many things that can change throughout it. But the Hawthorn game was, it's special. I certainly don't get sick of watching it or if there are highlights on TV. Because you run out and there's 100,000 people there. It's like, hey, it's this. It's as a young kid. I wasn't a kid, but as a young guy who experienced that for the first time, it was very special.
What about kicking goals on grand final day? Like,
that's pretty special too. Yeah.
And like a crucial one, there was one late in the fourth quarter there that was a crucial goal.
Yeah, it was and for anyone who's sort of seen the game, it was a seesawing game. Like, first quarter, they blew us out. Second quarter, we played probably the best quarter we played all year. We kicked 8 goals in a row. We were well on top of them. Third quarter, Hawthorn were a great team. They came back. They went a couple of goals in front in the last quarter, but we actually had the wind in that last quarter, and that was the scoring end all day. So we always felt confident that if we could get 1, we could get 2, we could get 3. And that moment that you spoke of was sort of typical of that. It was a ball on the wing, kicked up. I just kept pushing. Myself and Dan Hanbury ran ourselves into the ground that last quarter. But a pretty big moment there. Poor old Clinton Young fell over in the goal square, and I took advantage of it. And then Goodsy kicked one to put us in front, which is iconic in itself because he had a torn posterior cruciate ligament that game that he tore in the second quarter. And then obviously Nick Malcheski kicked the sealer. So it's just like, when the siren went, I've sort of spoken to a few people, the overwhelming feeling I had was one of relief. I just dropped to the ground. It was like everything that you've wanted to achieve since you're a kid is all of a sudden, the siren's gone, it's happened. It's just incredible. So yeah, memories I'll never forget.
If you could, I think of one memory in terms of in the aftermath, is there anything that stands out to you in the celebration of just a pinch yourself moment? I've been watching the Last Dance and just all those iconic shots of Michael Jordan afterwards, where he's on the ground or he's, they got the cigars, they got the goggles on or whatever. Is there anything in your celebrations that you remember?
Yes, there are. The cigars weren't out. not at that point anyway. I mean, there are a lot of great moments. I think for me, it probably happened a couple of days later. On the Wednesday, we got the entire playing group and John together, and it was the first time we'd probably seen everyone together since the game, because you might go out and see each other, but there's parades and there's all sorts of things going on that week. But on the Wednesday, we caught up in the players' lounge just up in the room, and the AFL had sent us about 50 cases of Crownies that was left over. So we sat up there and we just watched the game again. And then afterwards we stayed around upstairs for a few hours and just had the music going, had our own little party. And it was one of the best, probably 6-7 hours I've had, just to soak it all in. We knew that we won it. We got to relive it again, knowing the result, and just enjoy each other's company. That's a moment I'll probably never forget.
Is it? Yeah. So everyone's just sitting there riding every moment, like what's coming, giving it to guys if they,
When Mel kicked that goal in the last quarter, we literally reenacted it again while it was happening. We picked him up and carried him around the room. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. Because you never really hear much about AFL celebrations. I mean, the NRL guys have Mad Monday, and that gets its fair share of publicity, good and bad. But is it a thing in the AFL? Do you guys have the dress ups and especially if you won a grand final? Do you have any of that kind of stuff?
We still had it. We just probably don't get.
Probably stay out of trouble a bit more.
The cameras aren't out as much in AFL in Sydney as it is in league. But we do celebrate. We had a Mad Monday. We had. I can't even remember what the dress up was, but we were there. Coaches are there. That was a pretty special time. Yeah, that was fun. But I mean, Mad Mondays, the last couple of years have probably dissipated a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's just the sort of times that we're in, isn't it?
You got out at the right time, mate. Yeah.
On a lot of levels there, yeah.
So to go from one extreme high, then look to switch the conversation. We're talking 2 years later now, and it's 2014, and you're heading into the 2014 grand final, which went the complete opposite direction for you guys. In the lead up, you're playing Hawthorn again, but when you look back now, is there anything you can pinpoint and say, oh, you know what? Looking back in hindsight, that didn't feel right, or that didn't sit right. Well, I had an off feeling.
I think we got ambushed on grand final day. There's probably no doubt about that. There was probably a tendency. We had the prelim and we absolutely flogged North Melbourne in the prelim, and then we were playing Hawthorn again in the grand final. And I don't know if it was subtly. It certainly wasn't spoken about, but whether we were just going to ride that same emotion again into a grand final. I don't think we certainly didn't. I mean, Hawthorn clearly had a chip on their shoulder. They came out and attitude-wise got us, and we look back on that, and it was a shocking day for the club. Again, weighted numbers of that day, we didn't have everyone playing well. I often think about you need your best players playing well, and maybe you can probably carry a few on grand final day. If you don't have your best players playing well, everyone needs to play well. I think that was the case in 2012. I don't think we had standout players in 2012, but everyone bought in. 2014 was neither here nor there. Our best players didn't play well. We had no one else really jumped on board, and we got what we deserved. And it was a rude awakening to a lot of boys and a few boys who were playing their first grand final. So that was a big shock, and that took some time getting over. We had to, we faced up. We came in the following week and reviewed it for a few hours, which normally you probably wouldn't do. Normally you'd want to forget it and move on, but we thought the best way to deal with it was to face it, talk about it, and make sure we had our heads in the right place to come back and go to work in pre-season. But it was all too late because we'd just given away an opportunity.
That was my question. It was like, what's the aftermath with a loss like that? You know, immediately in the sheds, then in the days after. What's it like?
It was one of probably disbelief in the sheds afterwards and disappointment. We didn't have a Mad Monday. We decided to get called in on the Monday afternoon and have a review session. Not to say that we didn't have drinks together and that type of thing. That went later, but there are more important things, and we had to just face up to what we dished up because it was crap.
Winners have parties, losers have meetings.
Who said that? Is that
I don't know who said it.
Classic quote with no reference. Yeah. That's true though. Yeah, we spoke about it and stewed on it and thought that was the best way to deal with it.
Yeah, I just remember watching it, and it's like AFL for mine. As you know, I played a bit of AFL when I was young, but for mine watching AFL, it looks like momentum's a big thing in sport, but momentum in AFL is a whole other beast. It's like I just watching that game, you guys, you couldn't stop them. They were just.
Sometimes you get caught up in it. Like it was one of those games where they were literally flicking it over their shoulder and it was going straight to them. Things are just on. Things were on for them, and the complete opposite for us. And you're right, momentum in AFL footy is. I mean, it's like that, as you said, it's like that in any game. But in footy, you can really, really ride momentum, and that's what we would always talk about. Once you've got it, take advantage of it, and we were always trying to find out ways where we could stop it and stem it. Because if you know that, you'll be in the game more often than not. But it was, we just couldn't stop it.
Another thing that kind of came out of that game, and I didn't realise this until recently when I watched the Adam Goodes documentary, is it's kind of where the first kind of resemblance of the booing started in that game, and then it kind of carried on to the next season. And I've always been, obviously being an Indigenous man, it's something I haven't even watched. Like I only watched this documentary the other night because I knew I was coming to talk to you, and I was like, I always found I'd get angry watching it. I knew I'd get angry watching it, and I did, and I got emotional. But like, I've always been interested in what it's like to be a teammate in that time, because I know a lot of you guys are obviously very supportive of Adam at the time, but like, when you look back on that time now, what was it like to witness what happened at that time?
Well, when it first kind of started, we didn't know what it probably was, and even in the grand final, I think it was there, but we weren't really sure about what the hell's going on. Like why they keep booing Goodsy? We weren't really sure about it. When it continued on to 2015, and it started growing and getting louder and louder, and then various commentators start talking about it, and it's when we were kind of like, well, hey, what do we do here? And I've spoken to Jared McVeigh about it because we were co-captains at the time, and it was after we watched the final quarter. We sort of looked at each other and we said, I don't think we didn't do enough. We didn't do enough for Goodsy during that point. We constantly had talks with him. We were always talking to him, mate, are you okay? Like, what do you want us to do? And basically being told by him and what the club was sort of telling us to do and what the AFL were trying to do to make it stop. They were like, let's not give this any air. Don't talk about it. Let's hope that it dies down. And in hindsight, it was the absolutely wrong thing to do. We should have stood up earlier to it. There was an iconic kind of image from the final quarter where Goodsy's at a recovery session down in Clovelly, and he's standing there with about 20 journos, and it was at its peak there.
I was there.
You were there?
I was there. I was at that press conference, yeah. I was only young, and they sent me down there. Yeah. I was kind of at the back, but I remember being
there was so many people there, and he was there on his own. And we were sort of saying we should have been there. We should have even stood behind him. Just at some point, we had to make a stand because inevitably it was going to break him. That was where it was going to get to, and it did in the end. Like that West Coast game that we played over in Perth, that's what the final straw was. And the West Coast is hostile at its best, but I've never experienced anything like the hostility that was at that ground that day. And there were spot fires coming off the ground with fans, and Lewis Jetta was nearly getting in fights with people who were yelling the most outrageous stuff at him. And that was after that Goodsy took some time away and went back to the land and did what he did, which is sort of on the Australian dream. It sort of goes through a little bit more about that as well. So yeah, look back on that and hope that never happens again. I hope that it doesn't. I think it may do, and it still is happening. We've seen it with Eddie Betts. But I think how we deal with it will always be different because of how we dealt with Adam. And I know that the Indigenous boys, when they go on their camps every year, they talk about this. And what Adam's enabled them to do is actually given them confidence to stand up to anything racial, anything where they feel like they've been undermined. They've got the confidence now to do it because of what he's started. Whereas I think they were always probably scared to some degree to actually stand up and point it out. And that's probably been systemic in sports for a long time. But what he started is hopefully a movement where they feel confident, and everyone else should feel confident to call it out for what it is, because it's just, it doesn't belong anywhere in society. So, for Adam, for a guy like that to end his career, I think he played 372 games, as dual Brownlow medal. He's one of the greatest that's ever played. For him to literally walk away without having the chance to say goodbye to fans because he felt like he'd be received the wrong way, and he didn't go on the parade on grand final day because he actually felt like he would be booed in front of everyone. Like, that's disgraceful. It's absolutely disgraceful, and it's been a blight on the game, and I fear that we're just going to forget about it because he's retired and moved on, but we should never forget about it. So, yeah, it's what Lewis Jetta did as well in that West Coast game, would dance back to him and literally, say, don't. It was almost like get stuffed. I'm sick of this. And then what happened the following week in Sydney with the crowd and the chant at the 7th minute of the third quarter. It's all movements that people, when they stand up to something, can actually be really powerful, and that's what that kind of taught me throughout that whole period. But yeah, I just hope that never happens again.
I can hear the anger kind of in your voice. Like, but at the time, you feel helpless, and hopeless almost, because you almost want to scream at 80,000 people, stop booing. But there's nothing you can do, and you're there. Like, it is. I can't imagine what that must have been like.
Yeah, we did. We couldn't do anything to stop it, and as I said, the first point of call was, let's just be quiet and not say anything because let's hope that it dies down. Well, it's the wrong way. It doesn't work. It actually got louder. We finally called a press conference, and the Swans were the first ones there. I think it was John, CEO Andrew Ireland, Chairman Andrew Pridham, and myself and Jared sort of fronted the media, and were the first to sort of say, right, we're calling it what it is. This is what Adam's gone away. It's affected him. It's actually broken him. I'm proud that we did that as a club, because from then, it was on notice. But it's kind of, unfortunately, it didn't really dissipate until he finished.
When you say you would want to have done more earlier, what would you ideally have wanted to do when it first started? Other than, when you mentioned standing behind him at that press conference, but what more now when you think about it could have been done?
Well, yeah, and this is the thing. I would have absolutely been solid in him wherever he was. So in terms of what we did with the press conference, that should have been earlier. We should have been talking to other clubs. What can they do? Because clubs started coming out and all of a sudden showing support for him after all this happened. That should have been earlier. Just the worst thing that we could have done was not say anything. We needed to call it out, and maybe that sort of starts fans to start calling it out, having measures in place at grounds to, nominate people, dob people in. We needed to do something. What we did, just sit back and wait, didn't work.
When you mentioned the game when he came. Oh, not before, when he wasn't playing. It was at the SCG, and
yes.
They had the everyone applauded for him in the 37th minute, and you were right behind Lewis Jetta when he kicked that goal, and he danced, and I remember watching that when I watched the documentary, and that made me emotional. I saw you there behind him. What was it like to be there, the first person there, right behind him as he kicked that goal, and that was that kind of moment? What was that like?
It was awesome, because throughout that whole period, Lewis was always a young, quiet Indigenous, and it wasn't really outspoken in a lot of these topics. And I think this whole situation actually brought out the best in him. We started to see him really grow as a person. And I had a lot to do with Lewis throughout his career, because him and I used to train together. There was a period where Lewis wasn't a great defensive player, so they used to make him tag me in pre-season games. So we became really tight, had a really strong relationship. And I just saw him grow as a person throughout that whole period with Goodsy, and he took a lot of the load as sort of the sole Indigenous guy within that team that was going to do something about it. And so when I gave him that ball and he kicked it and he just went nuts, it was a great moment. It was a great photo with him, and I contemplated doing a dance, Jake, myself, but I thought, no, I'll just stand behind him and clap him. But
I've seen you in Surrey Hills a few times.
Don't go there.
Probably best to just clap. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, just clap him. But it was a real growing up period for him too. So I was really proud of him.
There's something interesting, and it's been talked about a lot. The NRL is going through a kind of similar thing at the moment. Or not similar in the Adam Goods thing got way out of hand, way too far. But there's a lot of talk about Latrell Mitchell at the moment, and the way he's kind of treated, the way he's kind of, I guess, has become a villain. And it's the same question people are asking now. Is there racially motivated hate? Not from everyone, but it's the undercurrent that starts probably one faction of society booing or not liking him, and it carries this villain kind of mentality through everywhere else, and it's a really interesting thing. I don't know if you've seen it from afar, but people say, we don't want another Adam Goods situation, and I don't know if we're on that precipice, but it seemed to start with the anthem thing with Latrell and Cody Walker and guys not wanting to sing the anthem, and you get those people that don't like that, and then that villain narrative carries on. I don't know if you see similarities, but what do you make of that from afar?
I think Stan Grant actually talks about it in The Australian Dream, and it's almost like we accept the Indigenous athlete with the great skills and what they bring until they step out of line and say something that we don't like and stand up for what they believe and their rights and what they're going through. So we've got to understand that. We've got to understand that better. These guys have been through, and their families and generationals have been through a hell of a lot the past 100 years. And it sort of carries on, generational. If they feel like the national anthem doesn't represent them, their people, their generation, they've got every right to not stand and sing for it. If we tell them, we'll just sing it and put up with it, otherwise you're dividing us. Well, why don't we do the same thing? Why don't we take on board what we're saying and roles a reverse type scenario? It's. I think, put it this way, let's see if Nathan Cleary is still being hounded in a few weeks, a few months' time for what the social distancing thing that he got caught for and lied for versus the Latrell situation. And we'll see what happens.
It's the as Stan Grant said, you're right, the angry Aborigine.
That's right.
Nobody wants that. They want the great sportsman, and it's gone back generations. In America, you see, it was Muhammad Ali. No one wanted. They wanted to watch him box, but no one wanted to hear what he had to say when he was saying something they didn't like.
That's right.
And that's the really interesting part.
Oh, well, how do you feel about it, Jake? I'm interested in your sort of views on
switching up, mate. Yeah, I'm sorry to ask the question.
You're the Aboriginal man. How do you feel?
It's really difficult. I think I'm caught in between it a lot of the time because I work in media and I've had this discussion with colleagues, is the media racist? Are they targeting Latrell Mitchell? It's so difficult. I've never believed a colleague of mine to be targeting a person because they're Indigenous. Yep. And I would call it out straight away if I thought that was the case. But like everything, every faction of society, the media has people in it that have, I guess, a different kind of probably an old school perspective, but they don't probably intend to be racist, but there's elements of that there that probably carry through their work and that has a flow-on effect. And I just think it's like everything. There's just a small part of society that can kind of get amplified and create this narrative around the angry Aborigine and not liking what he said but it grows, it festers, and that's what I think is there. There's always going to be that racial side. It's always going to be an issue, but it's when it festers and it creates. This group says I don't like Latrell Mitchell. The anthem, this, and this, and it just makes it easier for other people to go. Oh no, I don't like that guy either. It just has that flow-on effect. And it was the same thing with Adam Goods, and it's tough to watch, and it's tough to be. People say you're a part of it because, as part of the media, people think, I contribute to it, and I hate that. And I know Latrell Mitchell a little bit just through James Roberts, and it's hard because then you've also got to talk about it because he's a very high profile player. So it's a really difficult balancing act, man. And I just hope it doesn't get to that that level.
I really hope it doesn't either. I really hope it doesn't. But hopefully, as I said, if there's one thing we can learn from, it's what's happened in the past, and we need to, as I said, make sure that doesn't happen again.
Your own experience with, I guess, blown out of proportion, hectic media, you've had parts, for the most part, Sydney players in AFL get to kind of fly under the radar and kind of have this, quiet life. And I guess that's part of the appeal to a lot of guys. They can come here and just focus on footy. But there are times where your life has been cast into the media. Well, what's that been like for you?
Well, no one wants anything personal, private, or otherwise splashed around the media. But unfortunately, some agencies and some media people are going to talk about it. It's at the end of the day, we're footballers. We're people forget that we're also people as well. So I've had a few things. Especially into my 200th game, I was a captain of the football club and getting splashed around on the paper very, very personal stuff that should never have been put out there. But unfortunately, there was ammo there, and some media agencies act a bit like gossip pages at times, and that's all it was. So, and I think it sort of flows on to social media and just the amount of in-your-face media that's out there at the moment that people and people have to deal with. It's blown out of proportion. I'd hate to be a young kid coming into professional footy now because everyone's got a voice with a mobile phone. Everyone can abuse, do whatever. It's very easy to say turn it off and don't have it, but what 18, 19-year-old doesn't have an Instagram account or isn't doing that, doesn't have that sort of stuff? They all do. That's just reality. So yeah, I think as you said, mate, the media can be pretty powerful, but at the end of the day, what I was dealing with, I had to just try and block that out and worry about captain of a football club. So you got to move on and get on with what your day job is pretty quickly and forget about it.
Did that give you a glimpse of, I kind of guess, what some of the more high-profile players, the really big guys, your Buddy Franklins, your Adam Goods, what they live with pretty much all the time? Like that's their life, is kind of this hectic, watched at every moment kind of lifestyle.
Yeah, to some degree, absolutely. I think sport in Sydney is not. We're not at that pinnacle though. Like if you look back, it's probably the NBA players that they're at a different level. Or the soccer players in Europe. They're at a stratosphere above what kind of personalities and, I say in inverted commas, but celebrities footballers are in Sydney. That's so that's, I don't know how they deal with it. I really don't. That'd be very hard. So, but that was a snapshot of maybe 2 or 3 days, and it wasn't nice for anyone.
No, that's what I mean. Yeah, it's a small slice of what. Like I just watching, as I said, I was watching that Last Dance and just Michael Jordan's life, like the things they wrote about, even though they wrote about him after his dad died. Some people tried to pin maybe his gambling had something to do with his dad's murder and stuff like that. Like just, I can't imagine what it would be like to be someone like that.
And if that was in today's society, it'd be amplified tenfold.
Yeah.
So you're right. I'm loving watching the documentary because it sort of takes us back into time, and apart from the suits that he's wearing, like it's
suits, and how bad are the sunglasses?
Yeah. So, but it gives a bit of a snapshot as to what it was like. So every time he's coming out, it's just people everywhere. But nowadays, if you look at LeBron, it's the same thing, but it's also he can't escape it when he enters his own home because it's on his phone everywhere. So yeah, it's just a different beast now.
I mentioned before, obviously one of your teammates is Buddy Franklin, and a guy that a lot of people are into, and a lot of people, obviously a very high-profile player, probably one of the biggest names in AFL history. What's Buddy Franklin like when he to play with as a teammate? Like obviously he's a great player, but what's he like as a guy and a guy to be around?
He's actually a very private person, and I mean, he literally lived in the fishbowl in Melbourne. Like he couldn't live in his own house because there'd be photographers out the front. I think he ended up going to live in an apartment because it was the only way he could get underground parking and that no one would hound him. So that's a pretty significant level to get to. So for him to play for 15 years and be at the top, it shows a lot about the kind of resilience that he's got as a player, but as a person as well. But a very, very private person. He'll come in, train hard. He cares about the club. He cares about the young guys that are there now, and wants to make sure that they're up and going to eventually take over when he leaves. But once he leaves, he keeps to himself a fair bit, and that's completely understandable too, because he cops a fair bit in the public whenever he's out. Yeah,
I can imagine. It'd be an absolute nightmare. But
yeah,
obviously they brought him to the club, and all the talk was about they want to win a premiership, and obviously that's still a very big possibility. But you guys had another chance in 2016, the 2016 grand final. I hate to keep bringing up the grand final losses, mate.
It's okay, mate.
2016 was different, obviously, to 2014. It was a much more tightly contested match. And look, I remember watching it in a pub, and as I said, I don't know the AFL rules that much, and I think a lot of people in Sydney don't. But we're all sitting there going, can Sydney buy a free kick in this game? Like, out there, was it the same? Like, because it was a tough one.
Far out, Jake. We just keep talking about grand finals and footy, aren't we? Like, yeah. I haven't really spoken about, I haven't done any of this sort of stuff, post footy or anything like that. So I look back on 2016. That was probably, there's no doubt that I think for our club during that period, we probably should have won another premiership. There's a space there. We made finals every year. We were top 4 probably 5 or 6 years in a row. We won the minor premiership twice, 3 grand finals, and 1 premiership. So there's an argument saying that we probably should have won another one. But I'm sitting here wrapped that I've won 1. I've got one sitting there.
There you go.
Yeah. So 16 was almost roles reversed in the sense that it was the Western Bulldogs riding this wave of emotion throughout the final series. You know, they came from seventh place during the year, were beating everyone in the finals, and then I think it was 50-odd years since their last premiership. So there was this we could sense it in the lead-in, in the parade and in the interviews. It was all about the Western Bulldogs and this fairy tale that was about to happen. So we played well. We you know, in the end we were a goal down with 5 minutes to go or 6 minutes to go, so we were right in it. Yes, there were decisions that went against us, but I look back on it and don't think about the decisions as much as we probably just didn't have the weight of numbers again. I think we just got exposed. Our best players were pretty good, but you know, in terms of the entire group, we had a few that probably didn't play that well, and they had a pretty even, consistent team, and they deserved to win. So yeah, I'm not sort of bitter about it. It was a missed opportunity. You know, come away with one in 2012 in my career. I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah. That's a good result.
Yeah.
All right, no more grand finals.
Thanks,
we
mate.
won't talk about football. Sorry to bring up those memories. No. Okay, so we're now. You're in your first year of retirement now, and I guess what's the transition like been after all those highs and football, and you know, kind of winding down your career after that? Where, you know, what's it like to people talk about life after sport? What's life after sport like?
Yeah, look, I mean, I was ready. I was ready to retire. Mentally, I was sort of had enough. I was really, you know, had other interests outside. My body was starting to break down, and you know, you look around the change room, and it's. I mean, us, the Swans now, we're probably the third or fourth youngest team in the competition. So we're preparing for this from a couple of years ago. Yeah, the fact that Heath, Nick, Jared, myself were no longer going to be there. So the locker room chat changes. You know, boys talking about Fortnite and all this other crap that I don't even know about. So, when it finished up, I was relieved. You know, I look back on it, not bitter, great memories. Finished in an unbelievable way. You know, in front of the home crowd at the SCG. But almost like I'm ready to turn the page and get into something really new and try something different. So for me, and maybe it's because we kind of studied and had some other interests outside it. Like, I haven't felt the burden too much. I haven't felt like I've lost my identity type of thing. I never really identified myself as just a purely football player anyway. I think if you do that, you do get into trouble. So, yeah, I took up a role. I was always talking with Tom Harley, who's our CEO. He wanted to keep me around commercially at the club. So I wanted to build up some skills in that regard. So I started a role in November, December in the BD team, so in business development, taking on some new business, which would have been around sort of a corporate membership, which kind of encapsulates business and sport, and trying to get people together and align that. So that was something I was looking forward to, and at some point when we get back into normality, I'll get into that again. But I was really looking forward to the next chapter. So it hasn't been, I haven't sort of been daunted by it at all. I've kind of been looking forward to it to a degree.
Yeah, that's good because, as you said, not a lot of people do safeguard themselves into that next stage, because football can be so important. But I think, as you said, you knew it was coming, so you've kind of prepared yourself. But what about work is work and one thing, but what about purpose? What about finding a purpose for yourself after you've done football? I know you started doing a lot of charity work, and you're doing some stuff with Craig Foster. Is that all about finding kind of, what more can I do other than just, what I do for a living as well? Yeah,
well, that's where coming into contact with Craig has certainly, throughout a period of COVID and, jobs standing down, and you're not sure where you're at in terms of finding purpose again. Like, that gives as great a purpose as anything. So I spoke to Sam Mostyn, who's on our board, and really, really big in sort of social rights and environmental issues. And she mentioned Craig. So I got in contact with Craig, and that was about 6 weeks ago now, and took Nick Smith along, who's retired last year as well, and we've been going down every morning since. Like, it's to go down to Addison Road in Marrickville and help out their food pantry. We pack boxes of food for the needy. So it's purely based on volunteers turning up of a morning, and they rely on donations from all over, but they put fresh fruit, veggies, bread, rice, canned food, and that goes to all sorts of people who are in need. And at the moment, that sort of list is growing, which is a real shame, but that's the reality of it. So doing something like that and getting up in the morning, that gives purpose. It's just giving back a little bit. So that's been great to do. And when work picks up again, I'll continue to do that because I feel like it's so important. It's just an important need. And if people aren't doing it, then it won't get done. So I've met some incredible people down there at that facility, and you come in contact with a few of the locals that come down and are homeless and are struggling. And at the end of the day, you think, well, if the worst that's happened is I've been stood down, I've still got a roof over my head. That's a pretty good position of privilege, I would have thought, to give back a little bit to these people that are seriously struggling.
Yeah, and Craig Foster, he's just a guy. He does so much, doesn't he? Like we saw him fight to get that footballer out of jail. Like, he's just a real socially conscious human who does some great work.
Mate, I've had some great conversations with him, like in terms of human rights issues and equality, and like we went down. He runs a program called Play for Lives, which came about during this period of COVID, and the whole premise behind it was, well, so many community sport teams and clubs have stopped. So that means there's a couple of hours every week where people would normally go down and train with their friends, and on the weekend they'd play. Well, what are they doing with that time? We need to there's a real need in the community right now for essential services and volunteer work, because what happened was a lot of the volunteers were naturally the elderly anyway, and they'd been put into isolation. So there was this great need, and he thought, well, let's band sport together. So that's where the concepts come from. And it is growing. Like, it's growing all over the country. People are really jumping on board. It's a great initiative. It will continue, as I said, once we get out of this pandemic that we're in too, because it's just good for people to give back. You kind of reflect on it. I find myself now as a white male, straight, I'm in this great position of privilege, and why? Like, I shouldn't be any different to anyone else. Everyone deserves equal opportunity. And then Craig's had, great conversations with people. Last week we went to a mosque in Lakemba and delivered 200 hampers there to sort of Muslim families and any other families that wanted to come down and were in need. And it was just about connecting people from different religion, race, sexual, it doesn't matter. Like, let's just get everyone together, and sport can be a great connector for that. So I'm buying into what he's saying. I think it's great, and hopefully we can build it to something really big.
You've always kind of been a socially conscious person, but I remember Charlotte told us once. She said a couple of, maybe it was last year. The years are just blurring together at the moment, aren't they? Like, but she said, if anyone spots a guy down at the environment rally by himself, it's just Kieren kind of down there, just because he felt like he needed to be down there and stuff like it's something that's kind of been with you for a long time, as be a socially conscious.
Yeah, look, to be honest, I was pretty narrow-minded. I in my early, grew up. Really, football was and sport was everything to me. Even in my early 20s and mid-20s was probably the same. I was very narrow-minded and selfish in that regard. It really wasn't until I met Charlotte and started having chats with her about everything else that's going on in the world. She's a journalist, as you know, so I'd watch news with her. We'd watch, you watch your Q&A, you watch Four Corners, you start watching Media Watch, you become you learn all these things. So that really opened my eyes up a few years ago, and now, like, that football's over, and that I feel like this weight's off my back. I can kind of got the freedom to do what I want, when I want, and if I can use my very small platform in any way, shape or form to get a camera down and showcase what we're doing with Craig or anything and the need that's required, well, then it's absolutely necessary. So, I think, it's just about, and the environment, the protest that was going on, I just went down there to see what it was all about, and it was good to be there for.
But as you said, like, your profile in sport, and this is the same reason why we've come to be doing this podcast as well, is to talk about sport can be such a powerful vehicle. And there's so many guys that have had, a lot of the guys we've done this podcast with have powerful stories, and a lot of people have reached out to say, I resonate with what he said. I had a similar childhood, a similar upbringing, and there's, as you said, but there's guys that do a lot of community work. We had the Drabojevic brothers on; they do coach young kids. And sport, when you're in the bubble, can be all-consuming. But when you look outside and you go, hang on a minute, like this bubble could be used to make a big difference, doesn't it? Like, it has such powerful effect.
Yeah, and I regret that I didn't do more earlier in my career too. It wasn't really until later in my career where my eyes were opening up and I was starting to see some of the inequalities that are going on, and you sort of ask questions. Hang on, what marriage inequality? Why is that around? Why are we still talking about that? That should be common sense. People should be able to marry who they want. So it's just, it's education. Again, education is key. Like, I watched the Four Corners doco on the climate wars last night, and how politicised climate change has become in the last 20 years. It's extraordinary. We're in amongst a pandemic where everyone is saying, listen to the experts, they'll get us out of it, which is absolutely correct. And it's because that affects us right now. Whereas climate change has been seen as, it's not going to affect us. But the scientists and everyone is telling us that it is, and it already is. And if you look at what's happened in past summer, it's going to get worse. So we need to, education is key to anything. And then telling stories about it. So if you've got some high-profile players who are keen to tell stories about the work they're doing in community, well, if a kid's listening to that and thinks that's what he should be doing or what she should be doing, well, then that's great for everyone. So, yeah.
You say you wish you were doing it earlier, but is it difficult as a player? Because when you're in this zone, it's so much about football, but it's also about, like, don't raise your head because you don't want to be, you don't want unnecessary attention. If you're, pushing a climate change and stuff like that, you've got people, you got the deniers, you got people at you. Like, is it hard to manage with a professional sporting career where you just don't want the unnecessary kind of headlines or pressure when you're trying to play well?
It is, yeah, because you're in a team environment, and you never want the spotlight to be on any one individual more than the rest of the team, or the team to be blown up in lights for something that an individual said. So often is the case is that the coach will say, just straight bat, let's just... And you know what it's like.
Absolutely.
At press conferences, everyone's got, the forwards went really well on the ruck, and look forward to next week. So no one wants to really put themselves out there, but that's just training, and that's because a coach doesn't want their team put up in lights more than what's necessary. So it is hard to then all of a sudden delve out and do something, out in the community and speak about these big topical issues, because you kind of feel this sense, oh shit, if I do this, is the club going to pull me in for a chat or anything like that? So, but in saying that, we had great mentors in Goodsy, Mick O'Loughlin, in terms of Indigenous communities and what they were doing. We got exposed to that, and we're like, hey, that's the right thing to do. Let's follow them.
Has it been eye-opening for you on a personal level, just doing what you've done with Craig? You said you went to a mosque, and you've probably been to places you haven't had the chance to visit for work, sport commitments and stuff, but to see a whole other side of, like, I'm being a news reporter, and I wouldn't see those sides if it wasn't for my job. I go out and see these things. Like, it's like a whole different world to what you've been exposed to at times.
Yeah, and because you're seeing it at its absolute core, that's why. Because, you know, a lot of the work you may do with football clubs is very regimented. It's almost scripted. You've got to turn up at this time and you're there for half an hour and then you go and do this. So it's... But when you're just there off your own bat and you're there and you're packing bread in a truck and someone comes up and asks you for bread or you see that it's absolute core and the need that's there. So that's when it does hit home. And more people need to be out kind of doing that to actually see it. That's what I think.
And yeah, mate, credit to you for doing that now, because you are making a difference. And the more, and I know a lot of athletes do this, and they don't ask for your attention. That's the other difficult thing, right? You want to push a cause, you want to help out, but you also don't want to be, a lot of these guys don't want to be seen like, oh, I'm just doing it for the attention, or I'm doing it for the media. Like, it's such a difficult balancing act, I imagine, as a player, to be like, oh, I'm trying to do the right thing, but I also don't want to be seen like I'm just some guy who's trying to make out like I'm doing good stuff.
Yeah, and the natural cheap shot from someone in the public would be to say that, oh, he's only doing it for the notoriety, or just because he's probably being paid to do that, which is rubbish. But I think if anyone's out there doing it, then that's a good thing. Don't worry about what's being said. If you're out there and you're putting your time in, then that's as good as you can get. I don't really care about your alternative motive, even if there is one. If you're out there helping when we need it, all power to you.
Yeah, exactly right. I liked what you said before. You said, is that the line in the AFL? Because in rugby league, it's like, credit to the boys. The forwards. What's the go-to line?
Well, we just changed forwards with midfielders. Midfielders got on top of us today. We got out of the middle really well.
Yeah, because
it's very similar, Jake.
No, I know. I love it. No, it's a good laugh, and it's a good game. Like, I think there probably can be a lot more better understanding between media and players, and part of this podcast as well is to try and bridge that gap, have guys on and kind of understand their story more, so we're not as harsh, they are humans. You got to think about why this happened with this news story. What's the real reason behind it? Why is he like this? We had James Roberts on, who's a good mate of mine earlier, and just recently he's been in the news because he's readmitted to rehab, and a lot of people say, oh, is it, he's because he's out, he's drinking, or he's doing drugs, or on the prescription drugs, and they see that as the product, and they judge him, and he's hammered in the media. But it's like, oh, if you actually listen to the podcast with you, you'll understand, and you hear this guy's story, and he's got a lot more things. Those things are just a byproduct of a lot of other issues that have come from a lot younger, even when he was younger, and that's the kind of difficult bridge we have as journalists and players. And
yeah, we're quick to jump, aren't we? We're quick to jump to conclusions with people. As I said, everyone's human, everyone's got a story. And often when you're sort of thrown into the spotlight, you're expected to be the norm and to be the, no issues, good citizen. But the reality is everyone's got a backstory. Everyone has their own troubles. Trust is such a big point. So with journalists, it's, and players and that will completely lose trust with journalists if they go against, or they try and write something that's taken completely out of context of what they're saying. So I think what you're doing, mate, is a great thing. I'll have to listen to James's podcast, so it'll be really interesting.
Yeah, it is, and there's a few guys that have been like that. Joel Thompson's another one. I did Joel Thompson in Manly. He's really interesting listen as well, from just the story of him. But yeah, it's... we're heading in the right direction, but I appreciate you coming on, and it says it's about trust, and we've had conversations about things you want to talk about, like just it's about having that relationship, because there's a lot of good things that can be done together when people tell stories, right? Just want to finish, mate. We like to finish with a bit of fun questions. Just first thing that comes to your head, and I will give you some prior warning. A few of these have come from my colleague Rob Canning at Nine, and he is one of the weirdest blokes you'll ever meet in your life. Okay, there's just some weird situational question that you might think, what is wrong with this bloke? But first one, who's the most random person you think you've ever had in the Swans locker room? Like a celebrity or a person that's kind of come in?
Oh, we had this discussion the other day. The Dalai Lama.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would have been 2009. He was over here, and Brett Kirk was had been converted into Buddhism, and so he went to one of his talks and got introduced to him and went up on stage and gave him a jumper, and as a result got him into the rooms after the game when we had a win. So it was very spiritual.
Any wisdom and past it?
I walked past him and gave a bit of a nod.
Yeah,
I felt like I got some good energy from him.
Touch,
so
touch.
yeah.
Wow, I didn't.
That's a little bit different, isn't it?
Yeah, that is very different.
We'll discuss.
But you could do a whole podcast on that.
Oh, yeah.
Is that starstruck then? Have you ever been starstruck before?
Yeah, met Roger Federer at the Hopman Cup 2 years ago in Perth. So I had a friend of mine who was working there, got me down into the locker room and just for a bit of a tour. And we were standing there, and Roger walked straight past us, because he was working for the tour, this guy, he grabbed Roger, and we had a quick chat to him for 10 or 15 minutes before he was about to go on.
Oh, wow.
So that was really cool. I was starstruck then.
Yeah.
That's fair enough, though, I reckon.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
What about weird superstitions? Yourself, teammates, anything you've seen over the years?
Mike Pike probably got the weirdest one. So Mike was the Canadian ruckman that used to play rugby union, played for Canada in one of the World Cups. Great story, but before every game he would brush his teeth. Weird, right?
In the sheds?
Yeah, like just before we're about to run out.
Yep.
Like 2 minutes before we're about to run out.
Okay.
Anyway, we were in this meeting, and because we always go in for a chat with Horse before we go out, and so someone would count all the numbers, and there'd be 21 and 22 on the side. Someone's missing? Who's missing? Look around. Pikey, where's Pikey? Don't know where he is. So someone's shouted down the hall like, Pikey, where are you? Anyway, he's come running in with his toothbrush in his mouth and taken his seat. And we've just tried not to laugh. Like, hang on, what are you? Come on, mate. You're a big, imposing, intimidating ruckman, and you've got your toothbrush in your mouth, and you're about to run out in the field.
Is this on camera? Is there cameras in this room?
No, not in that room, because
No.
that was the very private sort of coach's room before we went out. But it would have been great to get on film.
Wow, that's great. This is the kind of stuff people love to see here. Mate. All right, here's the Rob Canning question. It's a strange one, and it's a would you rather. Would you rather be in an empty 50-metre pool with 5 crocodiles? 5 crocodiles are in the pool, right? But it's empty, and you've got to stay in there for 24 hours with the crocodiles. You can climb the walls and stuff, but you can't get out of the pool.
Yeah.
Or a full pool, full of water, one great white shark in there, but you've got to get from one end to the other. You can go around the rim of the pool and you can hold on, but you've got to be shouldered deep in water, but you just got to get to the end. Or 24 hours with 5 crocs, but you're on land.
That's great, Rob. That's, oh, dear. 50-metre pool.
50-metre pool, yeah.
I'd take the shark on.
You take the
I'd take the shark, yeah.
What would be your strategy? Would you...
I'd just wait.
Yeah.
And then just go as hard as I could.
Oh, you just go. Everyone else has said creep around the side, but you're just going to pin it.
Just pin it.
Wow. And
it could be the death of me.
But or the thing might not even notice and just
go underwater.
Yeah.
Just straight under.
Wow. So you wouldn't swim surface
level?
level?
I'll go straight under.
You're going under.
I'm going stealth.
I don't know. I think I'd take my chance with the crocs.
Would you?
I reckon
24 hours?
I just think on land I'm a fair chance. Apparently they can't run diagonally quickly. So you got a good step on them.
Yeah, you could maybe step one. What about 5 of them?
Maybe they're all not hungry at one time. Okay, that's a good one. All right.
Yeah.
I'll tell Rob that went well.
Thank you.
Okay, if you could have beers with 3 athletes anywhere in the world, let's say living athletes, you'd have beers with them. Who would they be?
Oh, wow. Wow.
It could be a bit of a hard one. There's a lot of good athletes.
There are. Well, I'd probably say Jordan after what we've just seen with that documentary. Serena Williams. I think she's just incredible athlete. And the third, who are you?
I'd personally be Steph Curry. I'm a big Steph Curry fan. Yeah.
You're Golden State fan, are you?
I'm just more of a Steph Curry fan.
Yeah,
He really
okay.
got me in. Like, I've always liked basketball, but just the way he plays, the way he kind of changed the game, how exciting he is, I just captivated by what a brilliant shooter he is. But that would be mine.
That would be yours. I'll probably say, actually, probably not Roger, which is a shame because I love him, but my favourite tennis player is Rafa. So,
Rafa.
I just love his attitude.
Yeah, he's an interesting one.
Interesting. Yeah, he seems like a bit of a character on
Yeah.
court too. So, yeah, 2 tennis players there. That's a bit different.
You like your tennis?
I did as a kid. Yeah, I really did.
Did you play?
Yeah, I did until I was 13, 14, and then sort of footy went into summer, and then you sort of follow on. But yeah, I quite enjoyed it. Into golf now. Actually, you called me when I was on the golf course last week. So yeah,
And you sounded like you were a bit out of breath. You said you were walking up the hill and you were puffing, and I said, mate, probably not as fit as you used to be then.
well, thanks for fat shaming me on your podcast, mate. Wow. I was huffing and puffing. I had the bag on my back, so. But I'm enjoying that in retirement. So that's
Most frustrating game in the world, golf. I think.
It is, yeah. But it's just maybe that's why I keep doing it, because you're just enjoying the frustration. You want to get better at it.
Perfect. Well, Kieran, thanks for coming on the podcast, mate. It was sorry to drag on so long. I was kind of captivated by what you're saying, and hopefully other people are too. So, thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing your story and talking about the things that you're passionate about. When I think a lot of people will hear this and think the same thing, mate.
Thank you, Jake. No, I appreciate it, mate.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening, guys. We've got plenty more episodes coming your way very soon. Don't forget to follow the Refuse to Lose podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We look forward to talking to you again soon.